Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I am joined by Rachel.
Hey, y'all.
And Alex.
What is up?
And we have a very special guest with us today, Kyler Erickson. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. So
yeah, it should be a fun conversation. I don't know. I said that, and now I regret saying that. I don't know if it'll be fun, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, parts of it'll be fun. This part's going to be fun right here. This is where the fun comes in.
I'm a little scared, honestly.
We always like to ask our guests 3 questions. We like to, kind of loosen things up, make everybody feel nice and comfortable on the Uncomfortable podcast. So I'm just going to do that before. I like to see a lot of people get stressed out because I like to do this before the introduction, and then they think I forgot the introduction, and they get really stressed out. Like, you need to tell us who this person is. But no. We're just going to go right into these questions. First question, have you ever had a nickname? And if so, please share it with us now.
The one that I get called the most is just Kai, which there's not really a backstory other than my name's Kyler. So not the coolest nickname on the court. When I played at UNO, they used to call me White Chocolate. And so that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But those are probably the 2 that come to mind first.
All right, White Chocolate. If that's all right, we'll just refer to you as White Chocolate for the rest of this podcast. Okay. Next question, number 2. If you had a warning label, what would yours say?
Warning, white chocolate, ...
Might melt soon. A warning label. Probably warning he doesn't have the most patience in the world.
Okay.
So
it's a fair warning.
Yeah.
It's a fair
Very
warning.
honest, yeah.
All right. Third and last question. What's the last book you read?
The last book. So it's funny. I struggle with reading, but I just audio booked Bob Goff's Love Does.
That counts.
And so
That counts.
Yes.
I can't read. I went through school and just struggled to sit and read books, but I can do podcasts and audiobooks. So that's somehow I tricked my brain into letting me do that.
By admitting you read a Bob Goff book, you just became best friends with Alex.
So that's what I wanted.
I love Bob Goff. Bob, if you're listening,
I'm sure he is.
I love you, just like my wife told you when she saw you. We should text him now, right? His number is in the back of the book, but let's just keep talking.
All right. I don't know if anyone's watching. I can't go any further in this podcast. It's only if you're only an audio listener. Well, that's shame on you. But Alex has this glorious mustache right now, and I am going to be distracted for the rest of this episode.
That's why I brought it.
Okay,
It's growing on me. I've got more jokes.
I refuse to laugh at that, although I'm struggling not to laugh at that. All right. Let's get down to the brass tacks here. How are you doing, Rachel?
I'm
good?
all right.
Okay, good. We're all along for the ride. Now, all right. So why don't we let people know, if they've never heard of Kyler Erickson, let's let them inside who you are, kind of a little bit of your story, and just background. And so maybe why we would have you on this episode.
For sure, yeah. So I am actually from Omaha. I was born in Ames, Iowa, so I do like the Hawkeyes and the Cyclones. I'll probably get booed off the show, but but moved to Omaha at a really young age and have been here ever since, and grew up in the Millard School District. And so there were, 2 things that I really loved growing up in high school. One was the TV show The Bachelor. It was embarrassing, but I really loved in the second.
That's come up on this show a few times.
I know.
You're sitting in a really good seat right now because Mackenzie, who normally sits there,
She is a
big
Bachelor fan.
Oh, is she?
It's the Bachelor seat.
Yeah.
Be proud.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to make her proud. And that the other thing was basketball. And so I was obviously very short, white chocolate, and so just not the typical basketball player. And so I just knew if I was going to be on the team and contribute and make a difference, I had to live in the gym, live in the weight room, and dedicate my life towards doing that. And so in high school, I became kind of this idea of the jock. If you guys have seen Saved by the Bell.
Yeah. Were you Slater?
I was trying to be.
Okay.
Yeah. And Zach Morris wanted to get Lisa Turtle.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my idea of becoming a man and getting into high school. And couldn't grow a mustache, still was scrawny as could be. And so I put my identity and everything that I was into playing basketball and trying to become this jock. And so the way that I judged success in high school was, if 50 years from my senior year, if 50 years from now, people look back on my life and think of me as an athlete, if I'm in the Hall of Fame, if I broke these records, like that would be the pinnacle of my life. That would be the coolest thing I'd ever do. And senior year of high school at Millard South was very close to the shooting in 2011. And so was just a few feet away and saw and heard more than I'd wish on my own worst enemy. And that really changed everything for me and changed so many things for everyone who was there that day and involved in the Millard community. And so there was this question, the next few weeks as we're going to the candlelight vigils and the funeral and as our worlds got flipped upside down, there was this question that I couldn't get out of my head. And that question was, if I didn't make it out of school that day, did I spend my life living it for something bigger than myself? Like, did I do something that I could be proud of? And honestly, my answer was no. I had spent my life trying to become this jock and trying to break records. And when push comes to shove and when your world gets rocked like that, you find out very quick what matters and what doesn't. And breaking records just didn't hold any weight. Like, it did nothing for me. And so I changed my focus. I'm like, God willing, however long I'm on this earth, however long I'm going to live, I'm going to fight for something bigger than myself. I'm going to make my life this adventure, this mission that I can take my time on earth and use it for something bigger than myself. Use it to stand up for something, to fight, to make a difference. And over the last few years, that's really what I've tried to do. That's what my mission, my life has become. And that was really the turning point in my life. So.
I'll never forget that, like, I was working here actually in an internship at Christ Community with our high school ministry. And so we had a lot of kids that went to Millard South. Dr. Case attended here. And I remember, like, just getting texts and people freaking out about there's a shooting at Millard South. And obviously, like, in that moment, nobody knew what was happening. Like, minutes in those moments turned to, like, eternity, for parents and for people that are hearing. And this is only a couple of years after, a mall shooting, here in Omaha, which is super close to the church here. And so, and unfortunately, like, these things had become more and more happening, in our society. And then, like, I remember, like, Columbine, you just said that word 15, 20 years ago, and everyone knew specifically there was, like, the one school shooting, but then this was becoming more and more normal. So I remember that day and being here at CCC, and, like, as a staff, student ministry staff, we were thinking, what are we going to do? Like, who's involved, who's affected? And we ended up having a prayer service, that night, just trying to at least do something and having counselors on staff. But I can't imagine, I grew up here in Omaha, went to Burke High School down the road. Like, I can't imagine what that would have done, because I had the similar story. Like, I just was not the athletic guy. Like, God didn't gift me with athletic genes, but I just worked hard and wanted to be a jock, and also loved Saved by the Bell, not quite The Bachelor.
Love it. You need to watch it.
And wanted to be all of those, all of those things. And so my world was totally revolving around that. But to have a moment like that in high school, you talked a little bit about you were there that day and things like that. Can you maybe walk back as much as you can or willing to, like, through that day and kind of where you were, the landscape of what was happening, as you're involved in, like, that tragedy that did change your life and kind of put you on the path you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So we actually had a game the night prior, and I had rolled my ankle really, really bad. So it was in a boot, was on crutches. And so we come back to school that next morning, and I'm in the nurse's office icing my ankle, and just in the middle of Millard South is the principal, assistant principal, athletic director, nurse's office. I mean, they're all right next door to each other, and so I was just in the room next door to where everything happened, and so saw and heard way too much, and here's I grew up in the church, and was told to love Jesus and that he has this great plan for us. And here's what really changed for me that day. It was, so now I have a choice, and we all had a choice. It's like life is a bunch of random events, and they don't really add up to anything. They don't mean anything, and that's one way to look at it. Like, this was just an accident. Or according to the Bible and what Jesus says, it's like, I have a plan for you. It's going to be hard. I love you, but I'm going to equip you. And he says everything that happens is according to my plan. So then it was like, okay, there's two sides, and one's a lot easier. It's like nothing matters. Everything's chaos. Everything just, and a lot of people choose that. It is easier. Or this other one is like, there's a reason for all of this. There's a reason, and I grew up with divorced parents and never had a whole lot of money. But there's a reason for all of this. And he says, like, I'm equipping you, and you're going to go and do things that I want you to do. So that's the side that I chose to believe. And then every time that I was hurt and broken down and on my knees, it's like he's there. He just says, I love you. I'm here for you. I forgive you. I encourage you. And to me, it just was a supernatural love and a supernatural level of grace that I had never felt before. And so that's what first shifted me towards Jesus. But I actually went away to college at Northwest Missouri State my first 2 years, and my first 6 months there were the worst 6 months of my life. And if you've ever seen like Insidious or Paranormal Activity, any of those scary movies, everything happens at right around 3 a.m. And every single night for the 6 months that I was away in Maryville, Missouri, I would see these visions in my head, and I would see these almost hallucinations replaying the day of the shooting every single night. And I would hear these screams over and over and over again. And anytime that fireworks were outside, or if you were flipping through the TV in the First 48, any of those crime shows, if I heard gunshots, I would curl up into a ball and just sit in the corner of my room and bawl my eyes out. It was like I couldn't process. I was 18 years old, had just witnessed a shooting. I couldn't process what I had seen. And of course, as an 18-year-old, we don't know anything about life, let alone mental health, let alone how to deal with it. So I was clueless what to do, and I just didn't tell anybody. Now, there's a real stigma with mental health too, and that stigma says, if you have a broken arm, that's fine. Let's put you in a cast. Let's go to the doctor, and we can talk about that. But if you have a broken brain, keep that to yourself. It's seen, it's weird. And in some interviews, I've called it poison. It's like almost seen as, don't touch it, don't talk about it, stay away from it. And so that's how I felt. And so I didn't tell a single soul what I was going through, what I was dealing with. I was hospitalized twice with kidney stones, wasn't passing my classes. So I show up for practice, played basketball at Northwest Missouri State. I showed up for practice one day, walked into my athletic trainer's office, and just bawled my eyes out. It was like, this is what's going on. This is what I'm dealing with. I'm not drinking water, not eating anything, not going to class. I can't go on with this anymore. And so the reason that I try and tell my story so much now, and the reason I travel all around the country speaking to middle schools, high schools, colleges, is like, I waited until I couldn't go on with life anymore. Like the very last day. And if I didn't get help, I don't know if I would be alive. But I waited so long, and it ruined my life. I was like, if you need help, if you're struggling, if you're depressed, anxiety, PTSD, whatever it may be, please get the help you need. And the message is that you're worth it. You have a purpose. You're here for a reason. And so by telling my story, what I hope to do is open up the conversation, not trying to shy away from it, but rather to normalize it and to tell people, like, I was messed up, I was broken, I was lost, I confused, went through several months of therapy, turned my life around, and the same can be for you. And so that's really the message, and what I hope to inspire kids, and of course ended up transferring back to University of Nebraska, Omaha, and playing basketball here. But that's kind of the way that it went down for me. I just waited until the very last day that I could.
You said that there's kind of like a stigma around all this, all these different mental health issues, and like even with just people in general, there's kind of that stigma. But like when you were dealing with this stuff, how did your church respond to this? How did people who are believers respond to this? I think sometimes there's even a response from Christians like, oh, are you praying about it? Like, you should be praying. How do you kind of interact with Christians in that way, and what were their responses? And
yeah, so that's an interesting point. I think it's really twofold. I think, I prayed a lot and I worshiped a lot, but I also needed deep therapy and deep counseling. And so I took that next summer completely off of school, off of basketball, and I went to the same therapist actually that the Von Mar survivors, you mentioned the mall shooting. Yeah. We all went to the same therapist, several people from Millard South. Her name is Deb Jones, right off 96th and Center. But we went through this therapy called EMDR, and so it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's got about an 85% success rate, but what happens over the course of these several months, which is the worst several months, very, very hard, but it moves your memory of the events from the right side of your brain to the left because your left's not attached with emotions. So now when I think about the shooting or hear gunshots or hear screams, it's no longer crippling. I might think about the shooting, it might come up in my head, but it doesn't curl me up into a ball. But I get off track. But to answer your question, I think I've thankfully been surrounded with so many people who lift me up and encourage me. And I think that's one of the biggest life hacks is like if you don't have people in your corner, then you need new friends. You need new people in your life because that's 9/10 of the battle. That's 90% of life. You have to surround yourself with people who love you, who care about you and build you up. So thankfully, when I came out and started telling my story, all I heard was encouragement, and all I heard was, we appreciate it, and we're with you. And so thankfully I had good people, and that's what I heard most of, is they're praying for me, they're with me, and they're here to help.
Yeah, so how did you, I guess, get from the shooting? Obviously you had to return back to school, and then you got to college, all that, a lot of stuff happened between the shooting and then that day that you got help. Were the signs just invisible, like that? Did no one else really see like the struggle that you were going through because you were trying to hide it so much and they didn't see it? Or do you think there are people maybe that did and wanted to give you space and your own time? Or like how if we see somebody maybe struggling, will it be always an external sign, of an internal turmoil? Were there external signs, would you say, in your life of those that other people saw, maybe could have noticed but didn't respond to? Or
yeah, that's a really good question, and I think I played it off so well that I was still seeing my friends and still going to class, but wasn't passing all my classes, and I would talk to my family, but it was never very deep conversation, just because I tried to hide from it and shield away from it, run away from it. But there's also this idea that if we were to walk down a hallway, that we could pick out the people who are struggling. Like we could pick out the ones who are hurting or depressed or anxiety, whatever it may be. And the best example, I always think of Robin Williams and the guy who had everything: fame, fortune, money, family, wife, kids, and he didn't have his brain and he ended up committing suicide. And so it's not always visible, and it's not always something that we can see. And so mental illness does not discriminate. And again, that's through telling my story. That's the only mission, is like counseling is cool. Like, let's make it something that we can talk about. Let's make it something that we can bring up in our daily conversations so that people who are hurting, okay, maybe I need help. Maybe I should go see a counselor. And that's the point of all of this. That's the goal of what I do. So
cool.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of demystify that stigma, because I think, to Rachel's point, like, I think sometimes you will encounter believers who are maybe apprehensive towards counseling, or at least different forms of mental health, and think, well, like you said, you just got to pray about it and kind of brush it off. But I think, just the same way that God's provided doctors so that we have medicine to heal our bodies when they're physically broken, when we have mental illness, that's something that shouldn't be ignored.
And specific doctors, because I think as a pastor, one of the struggles, there's people that come in here all the time at this church, any church, and need help and are broken and have reached the points of like knowing they're broken. But I think one of the dangers that's happened in the church a lot is pastors have tried to be experts in things that they're not experts in, so like, to me, I've had to learn the hard way. Like, I'm not a brain surgeon. I am not a counselor. Like, I've taken classes on it, all those kind of things. But there's a point that I just have to refer somebody to get professional help. Like, my daughter's going through a bunch of medical stuff right now. And so it would be super ignorant for us to just keep taking her just to her normal doctor.
Mm-hmm.
We have to go to specialists who specialize in certain things. Otherwise, they're just going to malpractice, and that all you can do is malpractice if you don't have a specialty into that. And so I think as pastors, as people in the church, sometimes we think that we are, because we are equipped with God's word and we're equipped with God's spirit, that we're overly equipped to just deal with somebody that has, some of these problems. And there is stigmas. Like yesterday, I was sitting in a counselor's office talking about things myself. And so, having those kind of conversations about, hey, this is something that we all need, that we all on a journey to get healthy in our minds and our brains have to just have that conversation. So thanks for being willing to talk about that and talk about that to young kids. 'Cause I think it's ingrained to us like way before we become old people, like all of us. So,
and so with what you experienced do you look at some of that? I mean, one of the things I think that we saw very prevalent with like Sandy Hook and even what was the other, Parkland, was survivor's guilt started to become a big topic with that, and I think that in itself kind of takes on, it's a form of PTSD. Is that something that you think you were experiencing, or was it maybe a different form of PTSD? Or
yeah, so I don't know so much that I have survivor's guilt, but there may have been a form of it. And so a few weeks and a few months following the shooting, when I was really struggling and really hurting, working through my PTSD and depression, those were the two things that I was diagnosed with following the shooting. It was, I thought, why didn't I do more? Like, why didn't I run at, the kid's name was Robert Butler Jr. He just transferred him from Lincoln. He's like, why didn't I run in and try and stop it? Run in and try and tackle him, or to do something more about it. And it kept me up for the next several weeks and months. And then when I was healthy and I'm doing much better now, but I look back on that and I was like, how would that make sense that I would run at a kid with a gun?
Right.
And so that was the extent of survivor's guilt for me, was why didn't I do more? And then now that I'm healthy and can see more clearly, it makes sense that I shouldn't have done more, or really probably couldn't have.
Right.
And so that's the most survivor's guilt that I felt, but it's a very real issue, and we're seeing people from Columbine still have issues, and of course those last a lifetime, but the more we tell our stories and become vulnerable, the more others will do that as well. So
yeah, I actually was a teacher for a couple of years, and there was a lot of shootings during the time that I was a teacher. And so obviously that is just going in my mind every single day while I'm at school with kids, walking through the hallways. Like, on my mind, it's, okay, if there was a shooter right now, what would I do? How would I get my class, out of the hallway, or like safe? Or if we're in the classroom, how am I going to break this window open and get my kid? Like, what are the procedures? And it caused a lot of fear and anxiety for me every day, just being in the school and just thinking about, man, there's shootings, like, and it could be our school any day. It could be our school. Sure. And so I kind of just want to know, like, even now, or like even through after this, how have you interacted every day with just that kind of maybe fear? Have you had that fear of like, oh, this is real, like there could be shootings anywhere? Like, do you have that fear now, or are you kind of moved past that?
Yeah, it's always in the back of my head. So when I was in college, and I'm actually going back to become a licensed mental health practitioner, and hope to have my own practice one day, but I can't sit in front of classrooms, and when I'm in a restaurant, I can't sit at the front of the restaurant. And that's very mild stuff, but you're right, it's always in the back of my head, and it's not a bad thing to be equipped, I guess, or to be ready. Now you don't want to live in a pessimist world and think, every second something's gonna happen, because that's just not the world we live in. Thankfully, we're in a very free and beautiful country. But that would probably be the extent. I just hate being near the door around a lot of people, and don't like huge groups of people as much as I used to. So
yeah. So, I wonder too, as there's a lot of discussion. Rachel, you mentioned that you were a teacher for a while, and there's a lot of discussion sometimes about teachers being armed, and like, is that something and I don't think we're here to debate that or settle that argument, but is that something where you think, well, okay, sure, maybe that's a good idea, maybe that's a bad idea, but what are your thoughts around that? Is that something you want to talk about?
Yeah. So there have been a million different solutions, see-through backpacks or metal detectors, or the door locks underneath the door in case. So I'm not a teacher, I never have been, so I hate to speak about things that I don't have experience in, but and I don't want to mandate or require that teachers have guns, because a lot of teachers obviously don't feel comfortable and don't want guns. So great. If there were teachers who felt comfortable doing it, got their CCW and wanted to go that route. I know there are veterans who hope to give back, and there was this idea that if we put more security guards, more security in every schools, it would be very expensive, but I almost wonder if that may help, even act as a deterrent. I don't know, but then the other side of that, the counter argument is, what if a teacher goes crazy and then they have a gun? So I don't know. There's so many different sides to it. Do I think anything will ever happen? Probably not. There's just so many unknowns, and the two sides are so polar opposite.
Right.
But if teachers, if there were few that would be willing to do it, and they were equipped to do so, I wouldn't be against it. And I think it may help.
Yeah. And I also think it's kind of another reactive thing for us. It's not really proactive with the people who are actually coming in and, in the shootings or engaging in that. That's more reactive. So it's almost, we need to be thinking about, what are some proactive things? What are the causes of these kids coming in and shooting? And I mean, I think obviously a lot of mental health issues as well.
And we talked about one of the main causes a few weeks ago, video games, obviously.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah,
totally not.
No.
Sarcasm there. Warning.
There was sarcasm,
Warning.
But we had that conversation, so I was joking.
I think there's been, I mean, just even to bring up an example, recently, the Joker movie that came out, there's been a lot of conversation about, I guess, in lack of better words, the bad guy. And I think your mission, at least as I understand it, is to hopefully prevent people from getting to that point, and I think that's something that we can, as a society and a culture, we can start to learn and understand what gets people to that line, like what pushes them over the edge to where they're willing to commit these heinous acts. And I think a lot of times in the news media and things like that, they just want to label, this is the bad person and they did the bad thing and we should be upset about it. And then that's kind of where it ends. It's not that we shouldn't be upset and that it is a bad thing,
right? But
like, we don't take the time to kind of understand what led up to this, because it wasn't just a on and off switch, where there was a lot of build up to it. And I mean, maybe if you want to even could maybe speak to that, and like, what's your hope in the message that you have to kind of help people, I mean, at least, I wouldn't say sympathize, but maybe empathize a little bit, at least to understand where these people might be coming from and what they're going through.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. I watched the movie. It was very dark, but also very real. And if you study the Columbine shooter or Sandy Hook or any of these mass, it's the same story. Yeah. They were neglected. They were beat down emotionally. Most of them don't have fathers. I think 26 of the last 27 school shooters, something like that, didn't have a father. Wow. It's very real.
Yeah.
And so here's the idea, and it's so funny. It's so interesting when I speak. So I've spoken to just over 400,000 kids these last 4 or 5 years, and the two things that I do, well, first of all, I share my story to the whole school. I'm very vulnerable with all of them. I'm real. I'm open. Like, this is my life. I was messed up. I got help. You can too. That's the story. So then they'll announce over the school, is like, Kyler will be in the counselor's office. If anybody wants to come talk, you want to come share your story, whatever it may be, come down. So there's a line a mile long. Okay. And I don't, there's no magic in me. Like, I'm not selling anything other than, here's the two. If you want to change the world, you do these two things. Number one, you listen. Okay, like, you can start an empire, you can build a business just off listening to people. Number two, you encourage. Okay, so we have these kids, and oftentimes the one who are messed up comes from broken parents, divorced, or they don't have either one of their parents. So we look at where they come from. Okay, we look at who they are. So it's like, what do you like to do? What do you enjoy? And there's this idea that I hate, but so many times we hear you should search after happiness. Like you should find, try and go and find what makes you happy. It's like, we're not searching for happiness. Happiness is like the wind. It comes and goes and you can't control it. It's like we need a meaning. We need a purpose. We need passion, something to chase, something to fight for. And it's so real. And so you ask these kids, it's like, what do you like to do? What if you can build your life around something, what do you like to do? And a lot of them say skateboarding or art or music. It's like, do that every single day. Find a way to make money, find a way to help people, and you will have this career and so many doors open for you. But we tell these kids in school to get the perfect grades and get the perfect job and have the perfect life, to have the perfect house. And it's like, none of that happens. And life is so messy. And so it gets off course so quick. It's like, no one does that.
Right.
It's like, what do you want to make your life about? Who are you? Let's do that. Let's find that. Let's find a problem that you can solve and spend your life doing that. And I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
No, you're
here,
good. Go for it.
But there's a psychologist, B.F. Skinner. Okay, he taught at Harvard from the 50s to the 70s. If you study psychology, you know him. But he took these rats and he just put one rat in a cage and gave him cocaine, and the rat got addicted to the cocaine. So it's like, okay, rats love cocaine. Well, that's not the story. So he does the same thing. He takes 6 or 7 rats, puts them in a much bigger cage with the cocaine, but with stuff to do, stuff to climb on, and different rats around him. The rats don't get addicted to the cocaine. It's like, okay, what does that say about humans? You need something to do.
Yeah.
You need something to chase, something to spend your life doing. It's like, if you tell these kids that, and even adults, that they can make their life about something bigger than themselves, they'll almost start crying. It's like, I can do that. It's like, that's what life is. And so we're just we're teaching the wrong things. It's not about happiness. It's about purpose. It's about a mission, and that'll keep you busy for the rest of your life.
That's really good.
That is good. What we've talked a little bit about, there is a stigma out there with counseling and all that kind of stuff. What would you say is a way that we as adults, people that interact with kids or school teachers or parents, because I think one of the things you said was it's how we project success to our kids or to the next generation, and then when they don't hit those markers, they feel like their world is collapsing and they have to either fake it and act like they're hitting those markers and not actually, and inside there's inner turmoil. How do we start to like change that narrative, because we want people to be driven and we want them to not just be lazy and apathetic as well, but how do we start to change some of the narrative about kindness, about PTSD, about what success is, and those kind of things? How have you seen, like, as you talk to school teachers, as you're part of like movements like #BeKind and all that, how do we start to take steps in that direction to be people that really want to give goals for people to attain, but also not make those like the end result for everybody in their life?
For sure. That's a great question. And I touched on this earlier, but a relationship and the things that I do, it all starts with vulnerability. So you want to build a relationship with someone, you become vulnerable to them. And will you get hurt sometimes? Yes. But to the ones that it matters, they will tell you so much. And as humans, we think by talking, like we think through conversation. And so these kids, they have so much to say and so much things that they like and want to do. And if you sit in my nephew's a second grader, if I sit in that classroom for 5 minutes, like I'm learning more than I did in my undergrad. You know, there's so many things they're saying and ideas and thoughts. And so I think it starts with vulnerability. And then also it's like, we can tell what's good. Like we talked about Mike Smith earlier. The dude loves skateboarding, so he built a skate park, and now it's a runaway zone for teens and homeless people. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, like that's good. Yeah. We know what's good. And so I think it's just taking the things we love and solving problems and spending our life devoted towards that. I always got in trouble for school for talking too much, and I loved people. So I'm like, what can I do with those two things? Maybe speak for a living, you know, and given the story of the shooting and the PTSD and playing basketball at UNO, but it's like, that makes sense. Like, that's good. And so I think, you know, we can tell if kids are doing the things that will make them successful. And I think there's a lot of lessons in school and sports, and that if you work hard, if you're nice to people, good things will probably happen to you.
Yeah, I think like in kids ministry, it's easy whenever I'm like interacting with kids to kind of pass on the measure of success that I have learned. And so I realized like, okay, it's so like, it's a default for me to be like, this was my measure of success, so this is their measure of success. And so I think one thing kind of to talk to what you were saying, Alex, is like, we need to kind of rewire what we believe too about success, or what we believe about what we need to be doing with our lives. And clearly through your, everything that's happened in your story, that's helped rewire what you think about your life and what you think about success. And so that's just helping be an incredible tool as you speak to kids and share with them. So I think that's really awesome.
One of the terms that we've used a lot in this podcast, and I guess we haven't totally defined, and maybe you're the best to define it, is that word PTSD, or the acronym PTSD. So could you help us a little bit, like tell us what is like PTSD? I think for me, for a long time, I just like thought of, and we talked about it, and it's very real for military veterans that come from other places. But in my mind, I kind of limited it to that. And the more I've pastored and met people that have said this is a diagnosis in their life, I've realized it's a lot bigger than that. But I think there is a lot of people that think it's mainly just, people that have gone to war and things like that. So what is PTSD? And I guess where have you seen, like, how'd that get diagnosed in your life, and what's it look like in society?
Yeah, for me, I think PTSD is the inability to process the events that have gone on in your life, and most of them obviously traumatic, but it can be anything from falling off a bike to now you don't ride a bike ever. Your parents got divorced when you were 3. You saw your mom hit your dad. I mean, that's the most common issue. Not the hitting, but the divorce. It's like that's everywhere. That's every kid. And so that's what it looks like for me. Again, the worst part of my PTSD was seeing these ghostly figures, hearing the shooting over and over, hearing the screams every single night, curling up into a ball. The fireworks. So the sights and the sounds were the worst for me. But and there's also this idea that meds are bad. Okay, and I hear it. I speak at so many conferences, and these speakers are like, there's too many medications, there's too much of this and that. It's like, okay, if you have someone who has diabetes, are you going to give them meds? Yes. If somebody can't function, if they have chemical imbalance in their brain, should we give them meds? Yes. Now, are there more than there should be? Maybe. But to some of these people, they can't function. They can't get out of bed without these medications. They have an imbalance in their brain. So it's like, let's not put a stigma on taking medication, because for some people it saves their life and they're able to get up out of bed because of those. Yeah. So I've seen so many different solutions. Therapy dogs are more common nowadays, really, really help people, especially the veterans who come back. Medications, there's a whole bunch of different therapies and procedures that you can go through. And so I think more importantly, we're not to judge which one works. It's which one helps you. Everybody's brain is different. At Millard South, people got help that next day, that next week, that next month. It took me 8 to 10 months to finally get the help. So we just have no idea whose brain is wired how, what helps them. So I'm not here to judge what helps somebody. Obviously, drugs and alcohol are not good in outside of medical. And so that's where I draw the line. But in terms of procedures, of therapy, of therapy dogs, it's like, get the help you need, because you're worth it. And you got a lot of life. You have a beautiful chance here to make a difference in the world. So let's get you the help so that you can do all the cool things you want to do in life.
Yeah. I think in American culture as well, it's always kind of about picking yourself up by your bootstraps, and there's a sense of pride to it. And like, okay, you messed up, but make the right choices now and do it for yourself. And then you have this success story where you're like, I failed, but then I did it all by myself, and I think that's something that people think is a story that everyone has to tell. And that's the story that's acceptable. And that's the story that's, socially allowed. But I think you're right. Like, we need to figure out how we can kind of take that pride element out of it. It's not a thing about being proud of what you did or whatever. I mean, sure, be proud that you asked for help. Like, if that helps you get across that hurdle, I think it's something that people just need to hear, because there's probably people listening to this podcast right now who are struggling with these issues, and they're afraid of how they're going to be judged, afraid of what their family's how they're gonna react, and their friends, and and I think that's one of those things where like if we can just slowly kind of chisel away at that stigma, it'll be a better place.
Yeah, and trauma is caused in so many ways, and so I think a lot of times we think it's this big thing as a parent who, is thinking about their life and their happiness. They're not getting happiness in their marriage, and then they get divorced. As a parent, you're like, no way my kid's going to get diagnosed. Why would they get, that's not traumatic. Me and my ex, we still talk. We're still nice people. We're cordial to each other. Why would my kid ever get diagnosed with that? And so I think sometimes, we think that. So as a church, like as we work at a church, and I think we want to continue to grow. That's why we have you on here, and we want to learn and have this dialogue. How do you see specifically like the church, people that are followers of Jesus, how do we engage in this in a unique way and help people?
Yeah, so and I've had some stuff come up the past few weeks, just some family issues that I called my old chaplain at UNO on the basketball team. He's from Lifegate. Mike Martin is his name. He's an awesome guy, but here's what he did. Over the last few years, he has loved us unconditionally, like with no limits, no reason for it. He just loved us. And so when things really got tough, it was, okay, I got to give him a call. I got to go see him. He's going to pray for me. He's going to help me out. And so I think everything begins when we love people with no agenda. And I don't know if you guys were here a few years ago, but a friend of mine had a son. A friend of mine from high school had a son a few years ago. The dad's in and out of jail. He's addicted to drugs. And she's like, would you take him to a Father's Day? You guys had a Father's Day here at Christ Community Church. And we came, and you had snacks and juice boxes. And we made like a space kit backpack, like a jetpack thing.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, and we sang. And I left the church teary-eyed because you guys didn't charge money. You didn't ask us to sign up for a newsletter. You didn't want anything from us. You wanted to take these kids, love on them, encourage them, build them up. And it's like when we think about Jesus and when we think about the church and really life as a whole, it's like that's it. Like right there. That's it. You guys took this kid who doesn't have a dad. You almost became his father figures or mentors for a day. Mm-hmm. There were hundreds of dads volunteering, buying these snacks, these juice boxes. You didn't want a dime for it. You just came and did it. And it's like, if there's anything we need more of in the world and in church, it's that. You just loved with no reason for it. Nothing else. You didn't want anything from us. So first off, thank you all for what you do. And if anybody from the church is listening, like you guys saved that kid's life, and he now has a place to go. He's got fathers that he can rely on. And when things get tough, and they probably will in his life, he's going to come to you guys. So thank you so much for what you guys do.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a really good story. I think you have some questions from social media, right?
Yeah, I put it out there. I feel like I'm like weirdly in a box in a weird room.
Your microphone might be dying, so we'll apologize to our listeners for Alex's bad audio. I don't know what's going on. I noticed that too.
I think it's the mustache.
Maybe I think it's interfering with the signal.
So much hair caught in the mic.
Yeah. It's just killing it. Anyway, let's move on to serious stuff. One person, and I think you've talked about this a little bit, so you don't have to add a ton to it, but they're curious. How have you seen God use this for good? Obviously this is evil. What happened that day was evil, and so how have you seen God specifically, not just like Kyler and good ingenuity and good ideas, but like how would you say you've seen actually God's hand in this in his redemptive work in your own life and through your life from this tragedy?
Yeah, the way that I see it the most, and most of the schools that I speak at are 2,000 or more kids, and I can't always say Jesus during the talk, but when they come up afterwards, and most of these kids are so broken, and a lot of them are crying, they tell me these stories, and at the end, it's like, I don't know what you believe, but I believe that Jesus is real, and that he has a plan for you, and I tell them, I say, just imagine this. Mostly it's about divorce, as I said, but it's like, in a few years, when we work through your issues and we get you out of here, it's like maybe you can teach a class on helping kids who have gone through divorce. Maybe you can be in my spot and speak and make something good out of it. And so the most that I've seen is just telling these kids that they're so loved, and it's not about action, it's not about succeeding, it's about Jesus loving them for no other reason other than he does, and he knows the hairs on their head, and no matter how many times they run away or they fail or their parents or their friends leave them, it's like he's always there. And when you're on your knees bawling your eyes out, you look up and he's there. And so that's the way I've seen it work, is just telling these kids like there's a reason they're going through this. There's a plan for them, and I'm praying for them. So
cool. Evil came into your school that day, but you're bringing redemption into so many schools throughout the year, almost every day. So that's awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions, or was that it? That was it.
That was. I mean, everything else kind of got answered throughout this, and so.
All right. Well, you were so prolific. You just
answered everything.
Knew all of
trying.
Yeah. No, I think this is a really important conversation to have, and I think it's something that a lot of people are working through in their own ways. And I think sometimes we want to be dismissive of people's struggles because maybe they don't seem, maybe they're not school shooting level, but it's like, don't consider, just because if you're struggling, like go get help. Like don't think that like just because you have a problem, you don't see it as big as someone else's, that it's not as important. And so I think if anything, let's keep having this conversation and keep working through it together.
Yeah, if someone relates to your story, or they want to just talk more, are there ways like to find you?
For
in the world that will give them their address, maybe your social. No, are there like ways on social media, or like websites, or ways to?
Yeah. Here's my bank card number. No, but my website is just KylerErickson.com. You can find me on Facebook, social media, Twitter, Instagram. There's a story in the Omaha Magazine last week, which outlines my story pretty well. And then I'm also the TV and radio analyst for UNO men's basketball. I'm at Baxter Arena every home game. But any of those outlets, I'd love to hear your story. And again, I think we change the world through telling our stories, through our vulnerabilities. And so if you need help, please get the help you need, because you're so loved, you're so worth it, and you've got so much time left to do all the awesome things that you want to do in life. So
yeah, and also, I mean, we have in this same building that we record this in, a counseling center called City Care that people would love to sit through with professionals and hear your story. You can email us, like the email that we always have, or we would be glad to meet with you and do whatever we can to sit down in the room and get you meeting with a counselor, get you looking for help with no judgment, no total anonymity, all those kind of things, to get people the help they need. So
yeah. All right, awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Kyler. It was really good to hear your story and hear that perspective, and I hope everyone else that listened to it really got something out of it. But that will do it for us today. If you want to email us, if you have any feedback or anything like that, you can email us at podcast@cccomaha.org. Or you can reach out to us on social media all across the board. We're at CCC Omaha. We'd love to hear from you. But until next week, we'll talk to you later.